There's a specific kind of quiet you only find when you're truly isolated. It's not peaceful. It's heavy. It presses against your eardrums until you start hearing things that aren't there. Last November, I was desperate for that quiet. I'm a freelance video editor, and I had just landed a massive contract for a documentary. The pay was incredible, but the deadline was brutal. I lived in a noisy apartment complex in the city, and I knew I wouldn't be able to focus. So, I went online and looked for the cheapest, most isolated short-term rental I could find. I found a small, one-bedroom cabin in the dense, wooded hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The listing was incredibly bare bones. It boasted about having satellite internet, barely fast enough for emails, but enough for my needs, and explicitly warned that the nearest grocery store was a 40-minute drive down a winding dirt road. It was perfect. No distractions. Just me, my hard drives, and the woods. I booked it for 2 weeks. I didn't know it then, but I would only end up staying for 3 days. The drive up was beautiful until the sun went down. The moment the light vanished, the trees seemed to close in on the dirt road. My GPS lost signal about 5 miles out, but the host had given me a printed set of directions. Turn left at the rusted mailbox, go 2 miles up the steep grade, look for the red gate. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, it looked exactly like the photos. A small, weathered wooden structure with a tin roof surrounded by nothing but towering pines. I unpacked my car, set up my workstation on the small dining table, and connected to the Wi-Fi. It was painfully slow, but it worked. The first night was entirely uneventful. I worked until 2 a.m., listened to the wind howl against the thin windows, and eventually passed out on the slightly damp mattress in the bedroom. It wasn't until the afternoon of my second day that things started to feel off. I was taking a break from editing and decided to stretch my legs. I walked out onto the small back porch to get some fresh air. The property backed up against a steep incline of dense forest. As I was standing there, drinking a lukewarm cup of coffee, something caught the sunlight about 30 yards up the hill. A glint of glass. I set my coffee down and walked up the incline. My boots crunched loudly on the dead leaves. When I reached the spot, I found a small camouflage-painted box strapped to the trunk of an oak tree. It was a trail camera. Now, if you grew up around the woods, you know trail cams are entirely normal. Hunters use them to track deer. Property owners use them to see what kind of wildlife is crossing their land. It wasn't the camera itself that bothered me. It was the angle. Trail cameras are supposed to face game trails. They are supposed to face outward, into the woods. This camera was angled down, pointing directly at the large back window of the cabin. I stood there for a minute, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the owner had an issue with break-ins. Maybe it was a security camera disguised as a trail cam. I reached out and unclipped the front casing. The battery light was blinking green. It was active. I popped the SD card out, took it back down to the cabin, and slid it into my laptop. There were hundreds of files. I clicked on the most recent one. It was a video from about 10 minutes ago. It showed me walking out onto the back porch with my coffee. The quality was surprisingly high. I clicked on a file from the night before. The screen showed the exterior of the cabin, bathed in the eerie green glow of night vision. Through the window, you could see me sitting at my laptop, working. The video lasted for 60 seconds, then ended. I scrolled all the way to the first file on the card. It was dated over 6 months ago. It was a video of a couple sitting on the porch, completely unaware they were being filmed. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I told myself it was just a creepy, overly paranoid Airbnb host. I resolved to leave the next morning and demand a refund. I didn't want to drive those winding dirt roads in the dark, so I figured I'd just lock the doors, pull the blinds tight, and get out at first light. I put the SD card in my pocket. I didn't want him having that footage. That evening, I couldn't focus. I kept looking at the blinds, knowing what was out there. Around 9 p.m., I decided to do a perimeter check. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out the front door. I walked the perimeter of the cabin, shining the beam into the tree line. That's when I saw the second camera. This one was mounted high up in a pine tree near the driveway, angled directly at my parked car and the front door. My heart started to beat a little faster. I walked toward the side of the house. I found a third camera hidden in the eaves of the roof, pointing straight down into the bedroom window. There wasn't just one camera. There was a network of them. And they weren't just pointed at the property. They were pointed at me. I went back inside and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone to call the host, or the police, or anyone. No service. Just the little emergency calls only text at the top of the screen. I tried to dial 911 anyway, but it immediately dropped. I went to my laptop to use Wi-Fi calling. The Wi-Fi icon had a yellow exclamation mark over it. No internet connection. I checked the router. The line light was completely dark. Someone had cut the connection. Panic is a strange thing. It doesn't always make you scream or run. Sometimes it makes you hyper-focus. I knew I needed to leave. Right then. I didn't bother packing my clothes. I just grabbed my laptop, my external hard drives, and my car keys. I shoved them into my backpack. The layout of the cabin meant I had to exit through the front door to get to my car. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever set up those cameras, whoever cut the internet, was out there waiting in the dark. I crept into the small utility closet in the hallway where the fuse box was. I had noticed earlier that there was a small access hatch in the floor leading to the crawl space beneath the cabin. I thought maybe I could slip under the house, come out the backside, and make a break for the car from a blind spot. I pried the wooden hatch open. It was pitch black down there, smelling of damp earth and mold. I clicked on my flashlight and shined it down. I didn't see dirt. I saw a folding table. I climbed down the wooden ladder, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It wasn't just a crawl space. Someone had dug out a small basement room. On the folding table was an old desktop computer, a ham radio setup, and 2 large monitors. I walked over to the monitors. They were on. The screen was split into a grid of 6 different camera feeds. Camera 1, the driveway. Camera 2, the back porch. Camera 3, the bedroom window. Camera 4, the living room, shot through a hidden pinhole in the wall I hadn't even noticed. My eyes darted to camera 5. It was a night vision feed of the front porch. Standing directly in front of the cabin door, the door I had been about to walk out of 2 minutes prior, was a man. He was wearing a heavy, dark jacket and a hunting mask. In his right hand, he was holding a long, heavy metal pipe. He was just standing there, perfectly still, staring at the door, waiting for me to come out. My blood turned to ice water. He was watching the cameras. He knew I was moving around, but he didn't know I was under the floorboards. I didn't breathe. I looked at the table. There was a thick bundle of black cables running from the computer setup out a small ventilation grate in the concrete wall. That was the feed line. I had to get to my car. I slowly backed away from the table, climbed back up the ladder, and gently lowered the hatch. I couldn't go out the front. I couldn't go out the back. I went into the bathroom. It had a small, frosted window that opened outward, facing the side of the property furthest from the front door. I unlocked the latch and pushed it open. It let out a loud squeak. I froze. I waited for the sound of boots on the porch. Nothing. I squeezed myself through the tiny window, tumbling out onto the wet grass and scraping my ribs on the frame. I hit the ground hard, losing my breath. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted. I didn't care about the noise anymore. I ran to the driver's side of my car. I jammed the key into the lock, ripped the door open, threw myself inside, and locked the doors. As I turned the ignition, the headlights flared to life, illuminating the front porch. The man was gone. I slammed the car in reverse, spun the tires in the dirt, and floored it down the winding mountain road. I didn't care that I was taking blind corners at 50 miles an hour. I didn't stop driving until I hit a paved road, and I didn't stop then until I reached a brightly lit gas station an hour away. I called the state police from the gas station. I waited there until 2 cruisers met me. I gave them the SD card I had pocketed, and I told them exactly what I found under the floorboards. They went up to the cabin that night. When they called me the next morning, the detective sounded deeply disturbed. The man was gone. The computer and the monitors were gone. But they found the hidden room. They found the cables. And they found something else I hadn't seen. Behind the drywall in the bedroom, they found hundreds of discarded food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag. He hadn't just been watching the cabin from the woods. He had been living inside the walls of the house for months. He would only go down to the crawl space to watch the feeds when someone rented the place. They never caught him. The Airbnb listing was taken down, traced to a shell company that led to a dead end. The police told me they suspect he bought the property specifically to do this. I live in a high-rise now. I pay a premium for a building with a doorman and security cameras in the lobby. But sometimes when I'm sitting at my computer late at night, I catch myself staring at the dark reflection in my window, and I wonder who is standing on the other side.